And it's kind of tricky because there's this kind of automatic assumption, especially from our perspective, we're so disconnected from nature, like, oh, like a nature thing is going to be enlightened. Like, oh, the plants know better than us. Well, maybe, but like maybe they're evolving too. And maybe, plants don't have brains, like they don't have chakras. They don't have the capacity to expand their own consciousness on the earth the way that we do. And so it's possible that the plants might be experiencing themselves through our usage of them. And so there is a possible way to think about this, that the plants are also on a journey to their own kind of enlightenment, and that there's an agenda, an interest in the plants of experiencing themselves through people that take them. So that's another interesting thing, the plant personalities.
Jensen, welcome to Cura Medicina.
Thank you, Derek. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's so awesome to have you here. As I told you, I listened to a few of the podcasts that you were on before, and was so excited to get to connect with you and talk to you and really dig into your journey because it's so fascinating. So let's start with, who are you and how did you get here?
Okay, well, my name is Jensen, and at the age of 17, I read the very famous autobiography of a yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, and that activated this deep spiritual yearning to have experiences like the saints that he wrote about in his book. So that inspired me to get a bachelor's degree in religious studies, where I looked into yoga philosophy and religious, and all the aspects of mysticism. I studied shamanism. And then, my first India experience, I went there for 9 months, just got a one-way ticket and just really threw myself in. And the kind of magical way of thinking that is more prominent in the East, where people believe that these mythological characters are alive and integrated into the mountains and the temples and in every aspect of society, that touched a part of my heart that really activated something. And I knew that that was kind of like that, not necessarily Hinduism, but that magical way of viewing the world was something that was much more resonant with me than the kind of common Western way scientific attitude. And so I really wanted to have those kinds of mystical experiences, and I was practicing many different meditation techniques. That led me to get a master's degree in yoga studies at Loyola Marymount, Los Angeles. And that gave me the container to really start digging into some of these the aspects of the yoga tradition that really resonated with me. And I encountered a number of really profound things, and then again, another, 5 month trip to India, and then getting into Tibetan Buddhism and all of the aspects of the Buddhist yoga tradition. So I was really kind of collecting all of these different mystical traditions, all of it hoping that one of the practices would kind of open the doors for me. And it really incredibly synchronistically, as many people here have experienced, the plant medicine world just kind of opened up. And the really profound moment was I was at the Buddhist Center in Arizona, and it's kind of in the vicinity of Sedona. And every day, as part of our practices, we were doing these rituals of offering to all of the spirits from Tibet, the spirits of the mountains and the rivers and lakes and the forests. And it just clicked with me. Why am I making offerings to the land spirits of Tibet when it's very unlikely that I'll ever go there? Meanwhile, the land beneath my feet, I'm in Sedona. I'm right here at this Flagstaff Kachina Peaks mountain. This was one of the most sacred mountains for all the tribes in, like, two states in any direction. I don't even know anything about it. Like, I've never even been there. I don't even know its indigenous name. And so that kind of something clicked, and I really had this feeling I need to learn about my own land and the spirits here. And everything just kind of blossomed out of that mental desire to explore. And so it wasn't too much longer after that that I had my first opportunity to sit with hikuri in a traditional peyote ceremony with huichol, and it was so beautiful. It just opened up emotions, sensations, and an experience of familiarity, and it totally kind of like shot all my other yoga practices in the foot. I was doing this long retreat at the Buddhist center, and it was winter time, and we're in these little boxes, and we're trying to get 100,000 mantra recitations. And after this peyote experience, it was just no way. Like, this is not the approach. I want something that's more heart centered. I want something that's more experiential. That's what is speaking to me right now. And so that set me on a really kind of intense journey of just exploring all of the plant medicine traditions that were in my grasp. And that was also partly because I had not had like an exploratory phase when I was younger of different psychedelics or plant medicines. I mean, I'd smoked marijuana, but even that was not like an extended phase. So this was this was my time to really dive into all of this indigenous technology. And, sitting with the tribe, the Huichol tribe, actual Mexican elders, that really opened my eyes to the plant tradition as a path, as a lineage. I mean, the context that I'd been exposed to it before had been kind of like hippies taking high doses without any kind of real, what I perceived as integration, but having it presented by elders who were true lineage holders, that that spoke to me because that's something that's extremely important in the Eastern tradition. So I had, 2, almost 3 years of exploration, and, uh, it pretty quickly, I ended up in the ayahuasca tradition, starting with Yagé, and then kind of quickly moving into the Santo Daime tradition, and then mostly with the Huni Kuin and a little bit with the Yawanawa. And in addition, just my own explorations with other medicines, I really opened up a deep relationship with the tobacco spirit through all of the different forms. And so I was just following the experiences of those ceremonies, every weekend or every month. It was like another chapter unfolding in my consciousness. And then I kind of, I guess I kind of like broke through to the other side of that and found what I was looking for, which ended up being kind of returning back to the Eastern tradition, but with a more integrated perception and maybe more of an understanding of how those energetic systems worked. I had been to the temples in India, hundreds of times. And even though I had belief, I didn't have like experiential faith in the power of temple ritual. And so when you go to these temples in India, sometimes they will light like a lamp, as part of the puja. And the old me was like, this isn't it. When's the deity coming? Like, how can just like waving a little fire in front of a rock actually bring the infinite the infinite consciousness? But then after sitting in ceremony for 2 years and having so many experiences of the difference of the energy in the room when a candle is lit versus not lit, I got it. So when I went back to India after all those years, it was immediate. It was like, wow, this ritual is really profound, and I was more energetically sensitive to that. And through, all of the prayers and the intentions that I'd been setting for those years, I ended up returning back to school, and now I'm in a PhD program in Berkeley at the Graduate Theological Union, where I'm going into a deeper aspect of the yoga tradition. And so kind of one of the archetypes that's been guiding me through the whole medicine journey, one of the things that led me into it, and now I'm focusing on in my academic studies, is this character or myth, this deity from Hinduism named Narasimha. So Nara is usually translated to man, and then Simha, like Simba from the Lion King, is lion. So man lion. And this is one of the 10 classical avatars of Vishnu, Krishna and Ram being the most recent. And for some reason, Narasimha had really made a deep connection with me, or I'd made a deep connection with him. Who knows how that works? In one of my earlier trips to India. And what really resonated about that image, and people should maybe take a look at this, is that unlike most of the deities in India, Narasimha is super aggressive, and it's an aggressive masculine deity. I mean, most people are familiar with Kali, and she's kind of standing, crazy, but this Narasimha character is a masculine archetype of ferocity, and there's only one pretty short story where he comes from. There's not like a ton of literature, and in that story, he just bursts in from wherever, the astral, another planet, another dimension, and he just eviscerates this, demonic king, and then he leaves. And that kind of quality, this kind of immediate, sudden, I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna rip apart the ego, and I'm gonna leave you to pick up the pieces. That kind of energy was something that I really respected and resonated with, and that's the way that I was working with the plant medicine. I felt like almost every ceremony was not an Narasimha experience per se, but something like an experience that was so overwhelming that had to blast me, and then I would pick up the pieces through the course of the evening and then come out the other side, like, strong and integrated. And because I had spent years memorizing the mantras, when I did get into these deep places in the medicine state and encountered fear or blockage and then responded internally with those mantras, it was doors opening up, really profound. And so now I'm a little bit more in a integrative phase, looking back on those years, I don't even know how I went through all of that, but I think that, the time will tell still how all of that is connecting. But yeah, in the course of all of this, I'd say I did successfully follow through on my original intention, which was to connect with the American tradition beneath my feet and understand a little bit about how the indigenous peoples of this land worked with the divine. Yeah.
Beautiful, brother. Yeah, let's back up a little bit. Thank you for that. And I mean, like you, I spent 20 years in uh, informed by Krishnamurti's work. I don't know if you know who that is, Jiddu Krishnamurti. I worked for the Krishnamurti Foundation for many, many years, and I always felt similar to you. I felt like, where is it? Like, where is the feeling of touching the source? Krishnamurti's approach is very cerebral, and it's, going at it through the mind, through peeling away the layers of conditioning and, getting at this place that he called choiceless awareness. I always longed for something different. I always longed for this connection. And it wasn't until plant medicine that I found that. I found this place, and I actually started to develop a relationship with the animate world around us, right? This beautiful animate world. So take me back to, let's talk a little bit about the first time you sat with ayahuasca, the very first one. What was that like for you? You had met the spirit of peyote, and as you know, ayahuasca is very different. How did you feel the difference? What was happening for you? Yeah.
Okay, so I had sat with peyote, and I'd had a couple months to integrate that. And really what that did was it opened up the desire for more. I didn't have a quite clear way of, it wasn't necessarily I need more peyote. It was just I need to expand this astral field however I can. And in those couple months, I became acquainted with Hape and, tobacco snuff from the Amazon. And that was really a profound experience because I did not have any prior use of tobacco. I never smoked cigarettes or anything like that. And when I first properly got the Hape in the context of a ceremony that came, I guess it was a San Pedro, it was a small thing and it wasn't super strong, but in that ceremony, I did have the opportunity to really connect with a Hape blow. And the experience that opened up was one of profound relationship. It was an ecstatic moment of like meeting a long lost brother. It was, yes, I love tobacco. Tobacco is going to be an ally for the rest of my life. No question about it. It was just this super super strong, friendly, masculine assistant. So after getting exposed to Hape, that really opened up a desire to learn more about the Amazonian tradition and ayahuasca. So, you know, when the call first opens, you don't know anything about it, and so you just kind of go with what is available to you. And so the facilitator of that San Pedro experience put me in touch with one of his taitas, the Yagé taita, and I just signed up. It was a really kind of a last minute thing. They've been full, a spot opened up. I was actually en route to Pakistan. I was leaving for Pakistan like 1 week after this Yahe experience, weekend. And so it was
Was
kind
it
of crammed.
Cesar?
Yes, it was Taita
Yeah,
Cesar. Yeah.
yeah.
And so I crammed in quite a bit into that. Uh, I don't so I went into it very open, a little bit naive, didn't really understand the difference between ayahuasca and yahe, and just went into it very sincere. And in that first ceremony, I met so many incredible people. So the it's the way that this weekend was facilitated, there's a daytime ceremony and then an evening ceremony. So the daytime was my first time ever drinking any ayahuasca related, concoction. And I handled it pretty well. Like I drank all 3 cups. There was not really a moment of feeling like I completely spun out. It was, I felt connected with the whole group. I mean, there were moments of kind of transcendent. I felt like kind of a divine feminine kind of coming through me. I had a nice big purge release, and I was doing great. I was like, wow, this is awesome. Like, this is well within my ability to handle this. And then the night ceremony came, and, I drank the first cup, kind of expecting something similar to the day. And, within the first 30 minutes, I was completely disintegrating into the geometry. And I was terrified. It was like the room, you're in the dark, you can't see anybody. I started entering into this place where I suddenly felt like I had become like a black sorcerer, like an evil like wizard. Like I was like, if the shaman doesn't do something right now, like I'm gonna start just like spewing like wrathful Sanskrit mantras to just like it was completely out of control. And then immediately he did. The shaman got up, started going around the room doing the flute, the harmonica, and it didn't like calm the experience down. It just kind of slightly redirected it into a more interior journey. And I just, remember so many layers of consciousness and feeling like I went right to the source of some, energy field that I cannot possibly describe. And I pleaded with it for my life. I was like, please, I didn't think I was going to die. What I did think that I would lose my mind. And actually the deepest fear was that when I returned, I might not return back to the same world that I was in. Like that, like somehow I might shift dimensions into a different world where things were not gonna work for me. It was very interesting. It's kind of like I was more afraid of going into a different dimensional timeline than dying. So I went into this Yahé experience and I just had to go through it. Somehow I ended up in the bathroom. Somehow I ended up outside on the grass rolling around. And, finally, at some moment, I, like, spit up the Yagé and, like, went out in the grass, and I just remember, like, saying, like, "People drink this stuff?" And everybody laughed who were sitting by the fire. They were like, "Oh, like, he's back." And then I was suddenly back, and it was fine. The Yahé told me very clearly, "Hey, you have some stomach issues, and I can help you, but you have to drink another cup." And I was like, "I just went through this crazy experience. How can you ask me to drink another cup?" And it was very neutral. It said, "Hey, man, I just gave you the information. Like, I can help you with the stomach thing. You have to drink another cup." And I did it. I went up and I drank another cup, and I ended up in the bathroom for like 3 hours. It was like now it's like the early morning, that period, like
Mm.
2 to 4 a.m. I was in the bathroom doing all kinds of like, mantras and everything. It was totally out of control. So it was a beautiful experience, and it activated the desire to go to Colombia and immediately learn with the Taitas and have more
Mhm.
experiences. And thankfully, because I said already I was on the way to Pakistan, I had a month off, like a month where I could not have access to any medicine. And it gave me a space to kind of integrate myself. When I came back from that trip, I went straight back into another Yahe weekend, and that one was much more integrating. I went back kind of to that same place that I had been before, and I kind of repaired my relationship with that space. I kind of had the impression that the first time I had entered there, my mind was disturbed. My fear created a disturbance on that level of reality, and there was a blockage there that needed to be undone. And so when I went back into that space, I offered, apologized, and said, "Let's be cool." And the message after that ceremony was, if you want to do plant medicine, I, I mean, explicitly it said, if you want to fuck with plant medicine, you have to be prepared to be fucked with. That was the clear message. And I kind of got it. It was a warning, but it didn't really dissuade me. But my feeling was the Yahe was not the starting place for me. So that then led me to seek the community of the Santo Daime group, and then that evolved into the Amazonian traditions. And I'll just
Mhm.
so then when I did finally get the chance to sit with the Santo Daime, the night before I had that work, I did have a dream with like a Peruvian grandmother, and she identified herself as ayahuasca. And I said, "Oh, are you Yahe?" And she said, "No, I am ayahuasca. Like, there's a difference." So when I went into that daime work again, it was very, very, very difficult. And I don't know if my body was prepared for like a Yahe experience, because I felt like a purge that needed to come out. But the way that the ayahuasca, the way that the daime, it's not as purgative. So
Mhm.
I couldn't sit in their circle. Like, every time that I was in their circle, I felt this explosive force either gonna come out the backside or I was gonna vomit. And every time I left the circle to try to make that happen, nothing would come out, and I was caught. So my only choice at the moment was, you know what? I'm just gonna sit in the grass outside the circle, and if I have to choke on my own vomit, then so be it. Like, I just have to go through this. And I went through this deep inward journey. This was probably one of the strongest that I ever had, in this terms of like not having any sense of orientation in that space. And there was this gnarly demonic entity, like it felt like some kind of insect thing with like a knife tip, like pointed right at my third eye, like just the
Mm.
nasty force was just all around me. Well, that first work just happened to be Mother's Day, and I didn't make the connection
Mm.
until later, but, what had happened was in that space, I was pulling out all my different deities. "Come on, Narasimha, come on, Yogananda." Nothing was moving, and I said, by the grace of the Virgin Mary, please help me. Immediately cleared. And suddenly that dark force turned into an ecstasy, bliss just running through my body. And the feeling was that there was an energy in my mother's line, my matriarchal lineage
Mhm.
that was stuck there for generations and needed to be cleared. And because I'm the first person in my European lineage to ever actually drink ayahuasca, it was like, this is the moment. Like, this was way more symbolic than you understood. And so then the second half of the work, I was back in the circle. I'm singing these like Portuguese hymns as if I like knew them already. And the force is just flooding through me and I'm shaking, but it's good. Like the energy is moving through me. So that was a really, that was a strong introduction. And that was a theme that continued to unfold through the rest of my experiences. Kind of like the first half is climbing and facing some big thing, and then there's like a coming down, and you're coming through the bliss of the realization. Yeah, yeah.
Amazing, bro. Yeah, so much of this work is about working with our ancestors and, you know, clearing what needs to be cleared or healing. I really love that you had that. Okay, I think I know the next chapters with the Huni Kuin.
Yeah.
Let's go into the Huni Kuin. And how did you even like so you start with Yagé, you with Santo Daime, which of course is Brazilian in form, so you're starting to get some of the Brazilian energy. And then how did you pick because there's Yamanawa, Huni Kuin, Nokikoi, there's so many tribes from the Amazon. How you're like, okay, I'm just gonna do that one.
You know, everything is perfect in the way. So a lot of a lot of the medicine work and maybe even just life in general is understanding that everybody that you meet is a reflection of yourself at any moment. And we're working with these kind of masculine, feminine archetypes, through our inner parents, through our relationships. And every person that we meet is an embodiment of some combination of those qualities. And so that first daime work that I went to, I actually met a woman there. And as soon as I made eye contact with her, it was like I got electrified, completely electrified. And I was just like, this is my soulmate. Like I had never experienced this kind of aura coming from a woman before in the eyes that immediately, that suddenly. And so, when you get that kind of energy and you don't know how to interpret that energy, usually the first place that it goes is like, oh, that's a romantic connection. And so that's where I went because it was a new space for me. But this woman was really sweet. We had, she was connected with the Yawanawa tradition. And in that early meeting, there was a kind of genuine connection there. And she actually gave me a bracelet, one of these medicine bracelets from the Yawanawa. And then there was kind of a disruption in that connection, largely because, like I said, I went immediately into this kind of like over the top, like romantic, like potential reaction and kind of like blew it. But actually, what that did is it caused me to really deeply contemplate why the universe had given me a Yawanawa wristband the first time that I ever drank ayahuasca. And I took that into my contemplations. And so I worked with and along with that wristband was an invitation to join the group in the jungle, at one of their festivals. So I went, like looking at all the ayahuasca experiences that I'd had up until that moment, like I knew that I was not stable, but I also knew that I was on a crash course into this world. There was no way that I wasn't gonna not continue to open this up. And so I
Could you
returned.
just I just double click on what do you mean by unstable? What about you was mm, disturbed or unsettled?
It just opened an entirely new world of astral and energy, and it was like, a person who's never had water in their entire life, and now they have water and their body responds like, "Finally, you gave me water." When I was a little kid, I was really interested in shamans and mystics and wizards, and finally it was real and it was right in front of me. And there are people drinking this extremely powerful plant, and not only are they stable, but they're able to like work in that space magically. And so, finally, I felt like the curtain had been taken off, and I'd been shown this whole other dimensional reality, and it spoke to me on a deeper level, and I knew that I have to know what this is, and I have to go into this, and I have to find my place in this world. And I had the assumption that that place meant becoming a shaman myself. So there was kind of like a desire to prove something, to prove myself in that astral sphere. But every experience that I'd had up until that point was one of tremendous difficulty and fear and losing my mind, and then kind of like coming back out of it and like putting the pieces together. And I just, I was so new to it that those experiences, I didn't know what integration meant. I didn't, I was, it was such a new thing, it's the baby bird coming out of the egg and figuring out that there's wings and then suddenly being forced to fly kind of situation. So unstable is maybe not the right word. It was a new territory that I was drawn to with a force of 1,000 lightning bolts. But it was terrifying to be drawn to something with that level of intensity, when for my whole life I'd been training in the Eastern tradition of discipline, of sobriety, of not working with consciousness altering substances. So it was strong, So I went back to my Yogananda relationship and prayed, please, give me a sign. Like, what am I supposed to do? Because I'd signed up, I'd put down the money to go to Colombia to meet with the 100-year-old Taitas and drink the Yagé, and I was like, "What are you doing, man? You can't just, like, go to Colombia and go to Brazil, like, you have a job, you have, like, a life that you're trying to build here, you have commitments to the Eastern practices, like, are you really just about to jump into that world?" So keeping us on track, the Yawanawa wristband really said something to me. The fact that it was given to me spontaneously in this first meeting, there was something about it. Even the fact that I'd had the dream with this ayahuasca elder, the grandmother, and so I felt like maybe there's something pulling me to the tribe. And then one of my friends who facilitates the Huni Kuin ceremonies, yeah, I so through my contemplation with Yogananda, I'd made the decision, no, I cannot go to Colombia. No, I cannot drink Yahe anymore. That way of working with it is not supportive for me. But I still kind of felt maybe the Daime, but I need another symbol. And so when my friend reached out to me and said the Huni Queen are coming, I said, "Okay, yes, this is an opportunity to meet the Amazonian tradition." And so this is Chief Yubu of the Huni
Yeah,
Queen. And
yeah, I've sat with him. Beautiful.
yeah, so, the first experience that I had with Yubu was probably the most profound. And I mean, so many, they're all the most profound, but
Such a beautiful heart that guy has.
really,
Such a
really,
beautiful heart.
really incredible.
Oh,
So
oh,
there was an interesting situation. So I was living up in Northern California, but I'm originally from Southern California. So in order to go to these Yuba ceremonies, I had to fly back to Southern California. I had to like put in, I had to take a break from work and go down and do the ceremony. So my situation with my family home and everything, I knew that it would be a little bit risky to maybe have that conversation with my parents about going, taking time off work to go do this jungle stuff, jungle drugs. But my mom would probably be more agreeable. So I didn't tell my father about this thing that I was doing. And when I came time to the ceremony, hours before the ceremony starts, all of a sudden, my father, who lives in a different place, he showed up at my mom's house, completely unexpected. They had some work they were doing together. They're separated, but they're still friends. This is all gonna make sense. So now my father's like, "What are you doing home? I thought you were up in Northern California." And I had to explain, "Well, the thing is I'm doing this, like, ayahuasca stuff," and it was not a good conversation. There was some judgment there. Well, even with that not good conversation, where the ceremony location was, he actually was the one that was better suited to drop me off because I didn't have my car because I had to fly in from Northern California. So he takes me to the ceremony kind of like begrudgingly, we're not getting into the philosophy behind ayahuasca use in the car ride. Drops me off. I'm getting my little space set up. It's my first time in the place. I don't really know anybody there. Just kind of that kind of initial like tension, nervousness. And I realized that I don't have my hat. And I had prepared, when I packed everything, I had this special hat, this cap from Northern India that I'd gotten like 8 years ago. And I had packed it with the intention of wearing it as like my ceremony piece because everybody has their cool stuff. I didn't have any of that. So I was bringing my lineage into it, and the hat was gone. So now I'm like kind of bummed about that. Oh, it must be in the car. Text my dad before the ceremony. Hey, is the hat in the car? No, it's not in the car. Okay, well, I explicitly remember packing it. So that must mean that it fell out at the one time that we stopped at the gas station. That really bummed me out. That was like a bad omen because I was attached to this hat. It was symbolic of something. I'd like intentionally brought it. So now we're starting the ceremony. We go around, everybody drinks the cup. I'm waiting for it to kind of start. It's not starting. So, okay, let's see it. It's different. I don't know. Maybe it's not strong. I don't know. So the first cup passes. Okay, I don't really feel it. Second cup, no, he asked me, did I feel the medicine? No, not really. So, okay, pour a bigger cup. Again, now we're like into the ceremony proper. People are singing and dancing, going through purges. I feel like a little bit like, oh, is this it? No, 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 that's not it. Like, okay, where is it? Maybe I'll do a Hape. No, no. Okay, second cup, not happening. So then, third cup time, I go up. Did you feel the medicine? No, I didn't. He's like, really? So he says, okay, I'll pour a special one for you. Said the prayer, gives it to me. And I, I'm feeling the same kind of tension, where I was sitting. It was
Mm,
outside. The ground was uneven. I was uncomfortable. And at some point, I just said, I'm not doing this anymore. I obviously don't connect with this. I'm just going to lay down and go to sleep. Like, it's over. And I laid down. And once I had relaxed like that, then I was honest with myself. And I was starting to follow this thread of thought. Yeah, really, I'm just upset about my hat. Like, that was actually like a really big deal.
mm,
Then the more that I thought about it, I was like, yeah, like it was like my dad's energy, like got into that. Like, he showed up at the last minute, then he drove me. Like I wouldn't have lost the hat if my mom had dropped me off. And then there was this feeling, there's an energy in your father's lineage that doesn't want you to heal this. Boom. Like that was the message. And then I'm flying through the astral and I'm having these like incredible downloads about my grandmother from England, how she moved away and it, like left her whole life behind when my father was only 3 years old. She was an alcoholic pub owner, addicted to cigarettes and never had a piece of fruit in her entire life. And they moved to Hawaii, you know? And my father grows up in Hawaii and goes through this spiritual transformation, decides that he's going to grow tropical dragon fruit and do this whole kind of like new direction. And then he got himself to wherever he got him. And then the ayahuasca said, and now all of that was so that you could drink this right here, right now. you could be the first person to drink ayahuasca in your entire family genealogy. And the message was, there are presences in your in your blood, in your genes, like those people that went through Europe, in the past 1,000 years. You cannot imagine the kinds of things that they had to go through and the things they had to do to survive, and the way that they got their power was like evil. And now these ancestors have this power, and you're drinking ayahuasca, which could potentially threaten this, astral power that comes from your family line. And so then this, like the ayahuasca, the spirit of the plant just opened up in front of me, and not necessarily in like a vision, but just in the presence, and said, "You've done it. Like this was it. Like this was what you were waiting for. Like this, like rebirth. Like now you've met a new lineage. Like this is like I'll be with you now forever in like this kind of like genetic way." And I was throwing up, and it was ecstatic. I'll throw up a thousand million times. This is so amazing, the information that was coming into me. And it said, "Yeah, who cares if you lost your old hat? Get a new hat. Go get one of those bands. Like, now you're in this thing. Like, you get to wear that hat. Like, out with the old, in with the new. Like, if those ancestral energies don't want you to heal, like, screw them. Like, just make the healing happen yourself. Like, what's the problem there?" And it was beautiful. So that was the first night. The second night, between the first and the second night, I so my father, he's a tropical fruit grower in Southern California. And he was driving by that morning to go to the farm. And I said, "Can you bring some fruit? I want to offer it to the chief." And so when he came, I looked in the car. Sure enough, there was the hat. He didn't even look. And it was like, oh, yeah. So I didn't really lose anything. So there's another cool little piece here. So my father, he grows this tropical dragon fruit, which is an exotic fruit for Southern California. So I offered this to the chief, to Yubu. And one of the people in the inner circle knew what it was and how unusual it is to get dragon fruit. And he asked the chief, "Where did this fruit come from?" And the chief says, "I don't know, like that guy." He's like, "Well, what's his name?" Like, "I don't know." Like, "Well, Dragon, try Dragon." And that became my personality, because after that, I made a deep connection with the chief and everybody there, and they started calling me Chai Dragon. At first, kind of like funny, but I really demonstrated like growing into that role. And so I drank with Yubu as much as possible in that tour. Probably had like, maybe 6 or 7 more nights with him. And that was an instruction that really just completely changed my trajectory, in life. Receiving Hape from him and learning that a chant can change the direction of the force. It can make it stronger. It can make it weaker. It completely changed the way that I oriented myself in reality. And the kind of amazing thing about this, and I don't know if I understood it at the time, but looking back, it's quite clear to me. In the Sanskrit mythology, this Narasimha character, he appears to kill this demon king I said earlier, because the demon king is trying to kill his own son. So the king is named Hiranyakashipu, and he's trying to kill his son Prahlad, because he's a demon, but his son naturally has this like devotion to Vishnu, which is threatening the king's power. And so Narasimha, finally, these many failed assassination attempts. Finally, the king says, "I'm going to take out the son myself." And in that confrontation, Narasimha bursts out of a pillar of rock and eviscerates the king and installs the son as the new ruler. And in many ways, I see that actually this ayahuasca was my own version of that story. Narasimha burst out of the earth, he burst out of the plant in order to kind of like restructure my masculine lineage. And I think that's really one of the amazing things that can happen with plant medicine, especially because in the West, we're so disconnected from our ancestral roots, and there's no way to live like harmoniously without those roots. And so what do? We can't return back to European magic. We don't even know what that is anymore. And so the ayahuasca, the plant traditions, and entering the astral, I think it has a bit of capacity to start to establish that connection again. And so, yeah, I'm never moving back to Europe. I'm here now in America. And a big part of that is connecting with this kind of like new lineage. And so, yeah, that was kind of a long story, but that was the introduction.
It was perfect, bro. Perfect. Yeah, and at some point, if I understand correctly, you did start to sit with the Yawanawa also, I guess maybe a little bit after this chapter. And I would love to hear about that, like how you got to that lineage. And then we can discuss this feeling of sitting with different tribes and some messages that you got in that I think are very powerful.
Yeah. So when you are new, you don't understand the difference between tribe and plant and this and that. And people say it's medicine. They don't really, maybe we don't have the vocabulary here developed to really understand the difference between medicine and other medicine. And so in the beginning, I was kind of naive. And so I opened up, this beautiful relationship with Yubu and the Huni Queen. And I think I had some assumptions that, maybe that was the way, or that the experiences that I had with him would be the same kind of experiences that I would have in every context that I went into. But, in my decision to, before meeting Yubu, even when I had made the decision to not continue with the Colombian tradition of Yagé, that was kind of informed by a kind of a grounding, a reminder that this is a world that we don't understand. And so if you just think about, were dropped off in the Amazon jungle with no frame of reference, with no knowledge about any of the animals or the plants. How long would it take for us to die? Like, probably like we'd last a week maximum, just walking around in the jungle, like you're dead. Like nothing, we're not going to figure out how to survive there. So why would you enter into the astral with the same degree of like cavalier? It's not necessarily wise. I mean, there's such a wide space in consciousness itself. We're so bold to just enter into that space and assume that we know what's going on, or that we belong there, or that we're entitled to it, and that gets us into trouble. And so I had become quite familiar with the way that the Huni Queen, my energy worked, at least with Yubu. And so part of that, returning a little bit to the Hape, I made somewhere in that process, I made an aspiration, I guess, a prayer. And it was a prayer that was an attempt to kind of ground myself. After sitting with Yubu for those initial 6 nights of his tour, I realized that I had, in a very short period, like 3 months, I had almost completely changed myself beyond former recognition. And I knew that this changing process was not going to stop, that I had opened up Pandora's box, and I was going to keep going you know, until everything came out of the box. And I just had the feeling that that could be ugly because, here and there you hear of people like, oh man, they had a big thing and now they're done, or this person like lost their mind. I had not seen it myself, but I had the feeling, it can happen. This is not proven yet. This is not a proven lineage the same way that there's thousands of Krishna saints. I don't know. Are the shamans saints? Like, is it the same kind of thing? Like, are the different spirits that they're calling, for the Huni Queen, the boa snake, is that like a enlightened deity? Like, how does that all categorize? So I knew that I was on this trajectory to continue to unfold my relationship with the plant medicine. So I made this aspiration to tobacco. And I said, look, I'm going to go and I'm going to explore everything that I can explore. But my center of gravity, the thing that my carrot on the stick to move me, is not going to be ayahuasca. I'm not asking for ayahuasca initiation. I'm not asking for ayahuasca to like enlighten me. What I feel I really want to know, the real reason that I'm here, is to learn about tobacco. And it's specifically Hape. It was like, you, I really felt this. I want to be a Hape guy. I want to serve the strong Hape. I want to take the Hape. When I meet Narasimha eventually, I want to ask him to serve me Hape, something like that, like just out there,
That would be
what's
amazing.
Shiva's Hape glow like, So I really wanted to, connect with that force, like what is the potential for exploration with tobacco. And after sitting many times with Yubu and kind of asking for like a Hape initiation, I wanted indigenous permission. I didn't want to just be the white guy serving Hape at the festival. I wanted to really be grounded in the tradition, and I wanted to, I wanted to do diets, all that stuff. And it was so new. It's just like the first 3 months, but immediately when you connect with something that is connected to you, you want to just get into it. Oh, I was doing Hape multiple times a day, and I'm serving it to people, and really, saying some of the prayers that I had learned, but I had not quite received what I felt like was a initiation. I hadn't quite felt like I'd received permission. Maybe Yibu had said like, "Yeah, you can share this," but I didn't feel in my soul like I was a Hape master. I didn't really feel like I knew what I was doing. So I wanted that. And so in the process of being more in that circle, you hear about other pages, other shamans, other places. And so I heard about the Yawanala tradition, and then suddenly like, oh yeah, that's how this all started, right? The bracelet on my hand, it was all starting from the Yawanala. And I've been told, I understand that they offer a Hape initiation, especially at the closing of one of the diets in the jungle. So you gotta take 3 blows back to back, and then you also get your tepi, and then you're considered somebody that has, permission from that tribe to serve. So one of the head of their villages was coming up here, and I sent them an email and said, "Hey, I know this is a little bit strange, but can I do the Hape initiation when the chief is here?" And so they didn't really say yes, because that's kind of a little bit much for somebody who's never sat before to also be asking for that level of initiation. But they did say, yeah, we can arrange something. And so in that,
Was it
it was
Mazzini?
Chief Mazzini, yeah. So Mazzini came, and, I sat with them up in Northern California, and I received a beautiful, beautiful blow, a really beautiful introduction to how they work with Hape. Honestly, it was maybe probably one of the best Hape blows I've ever received. It was super strong, and it was delayed in the sense, like, I had enough time to say thank you and, like, stand up and, like, get back to my seat, make sure that I had water, and then, the process started. So, it was amazing, and then after that, he in addition to that, he gave some instruction about how to serve people and how to work with Hape respectfully. And so now I kinda had this 2 thing going on, the Huni Kuin and also the Yawanala. I didn't realize the amount of lineage that came along with that. I didn't realize that when you made a prayer, like, "I wanna learn this," or "I wanna do the diets," that there's energies that hear that and say like, "Okay, like, come on in." So, all of a sudden, it felt like, I mean, it didn't happen that fast, but, like, over the course of the next 6 months, I was signed up to go down to the jungle to do the first diet, and I had had dreams of Mazzini, making tepi for me out of my own skull. Like, it was pretty intense, and it felt like I'd opened the door, and it was a door that I really wanted to enter through, but the more that I opened it, the more kind of messy and confusing that it got. And at the same time, I had already opened doors with Yubu. So then I was kind of in an interesting position because I knew that I really wanted this Hape thing, but I also was kind of pulled in different directions. Now, the crux of this is that deep down, I never really thought that I was going to become an indigenous shaman. Like, my main allegiance throughout all of this was still to my Hindu and Buddhist studies, the Narasimha work. So it was a little bit interesting because I was not fully a student of any of the Amazonian tradition. I was more an Eastern tradition student who was playing around with mixing different technologies. And in the process of this, I had experimented with Hape, holding a bit in my hand and then chanting a lot of mantras into that Hape. Like sometimes one time I think I held it in my hand for 3 hours, just sitting there meditating, putting all this energy into it. Wow, man, that was like there was some interesting Hape experiences with that. And so I really felt like I was cooking, like I was onto something special. However, I didn't understand the consequences of mixing unknown chemicals because potentially you get explosion. People all the time die from mixing, chlorine and, bleach, uh, and it was like I had this super powerful mantra that I had not completely understood. Like I might have memorized it, but I hadn't gone through the proper Indian practice of doing it 100,000 times or 500,000 times to really understand that mantra. And so I was calling on something that I didn't quite know completely. And I was asking it to then come into another thing that I also didn't quite completely know. And that is okay. But then I'm like doing that with like three different tribal energy spirits. And suddenly, it just like everything started to go south. I felt like something was wrong. I felt like I had spirits in my eyes, spirits in my ears. I couldn't shake this feeling of energy going off. And the only way that I could kind of keep myself going was just doing another Hape. Was like doing it 5 or 6 times a day, and that was my fuel. Just go to the next one. Just make it to not every day. Like, oh, I gotta wait till the next Hape, but just kind of this feeling of this is heavy, but maybe this is the shamanic journey. Like maybe this is what the shaman is supposed to go through. Maybe once I do the diet, all of this is going to make sense. So I was in this position, after a year of doing as many ceremonies as possible with as many different tribes as possible. And I'd had some lessons in that year. It wasn't like I was just completely like, oh, keep going, go, go. There were some maturing moments, but not enough to slow me down. And so I was gonna go and I was gonna go to the jungle and I was gonna get my Hape initiation and nobody was gonna stop me. So I was in a ceremony. Um, Basically, I had signed up to go to the diet with Mazzini. Everything in my life felt off. And I just felt this is the trial to make sure that you're really deserving the reward that is gonna come at the end. And I didn't have the relationship with anybody in the jungle who could really support me through it. I just believed maybe this will work out. So they were asking for the deposit for the diet, and I was delaying and delaying. Finally, I said, "I'll give it to you on Monday after this final weekend with the Huni Queen." This was with Chana Ikakuru,
Jana, yeah.
and that completely changed that ceremony with Chana completely changed everything because it's a three night ordeal. The first night, the message was, "We're gonna we're gonna clean you up, Jensen, but we're gonna teach you the lesson. First of all, Huni Queen and Yawanawa are different. In the past, like these were tribes that were not the same tribe. That's like they're different tribes because they have different cosmological structures. Like maybe they even fought and killed each other. Like I don't know. Like I can't understand real tribe mentality, but in the jungle, there's a competition of resources a little bit. And the ayahuasca was not always used in this like heart healing astral exploration ways. Sometimes it's used to get power, and the power is going to help you to get resources, to get like wives, to get food, and you are in competition with everything else in the jungle for that, including other tribes. And now it's not quite like that, but this is what the medicine was telling me. You have to be extremely careful because you've asked for really, really powerful stuff. This is not candy, this is Hape. This is the par excellence like spirit of tobacco, and you're blowing it directly into your third eye, and you're going one direction and you're saying, "Give me the great Hape blessing," and then you go the other side, "Give it to me over there." Those energies are conflicting in your head. And deep down, you don't even want either of these. Like you just want enlightenment. Like you want to do the diet so that you can meet your Narasimha. Like, dude, like you're all over the place. Like, so in this weekend with Chana, I got, slapped. And the message was, you're not going to that diet, and you're not really gonna drink ayahuasca anymore. Like, you're done. Like, you've been removed. And it was not in a mean way. It was compassionate. And the deep message behind that was kind of a vision of a past life commitment that I'd made. This is now, the main thing, because everything about diet, everything about plant medicine is about intention. What really are you doing this for? And the real thing that I wanted was, I want to know who this Narasimha guy is, and I'm not able to go about that the traditional route because I don't know Sanskrit, because I'm not living in India, because I don't have a living lineage of Narasimha worship to guide me. So I'm asking the plants to get me into the back door to this deity. And that was like my diet intention. I wanted to have the ultimate Narasimha empowerment. And in that ceremony, it was revealed to me, the plants cannot give you the Narasimha. The tribes cannot give you Narasimha because they don't have Narasimha. Like, that's not how this works. Like, if you want to meet the Narasimha, you have to meet the Narasimha in yourself. And it showed me what that was. And it was a past life agreement that I made in Egypt to continue the study of that tradition. And in the process of that, it said, you agreed to come and learn about Narasimha and kind of do this again. And if you continue from this moment if you continue to put your energy into the jungle, you will not fulfill the destiny, the commitment that you made. So quit everything now. You've got to this point. Good job. It was a rough road. You definitely have some battle scars. Now it's time for you to go back to India and heal and integrate all of that. And, of course, I could tell more about that experience, but the essence was this sense of like maturity that we don't understand anything about plant medicine. And I'm even, I'm not saying the indigenous don't understand. They're in a different position we can't even possibly imagine. The jungle is gone. The amount of land in the jungle is disappearing. All of the other tribes that didn't have ayahuasca are gone. So the ayahuasca is like everything they have. Of course, it's a medicine for their people. Of course, this is the thing that has opened up the the abundance, the resources that are now coming back to their people. But for us, we're in a different situation here. My ancestors never drank ayahuasca. I'm making these contracts with the entities in that world for the first time. And, just probably like the first Amazonian people who encountered ayahuasca, they had to go through some serious stuff, like allowing the spirit of that plant and the jungle to like really like reshape their DNA. And now they're the 1,000-year-old lineage holders. But I am the first one of my genealogy to undergo those initiations. And it's just not balanced for me to take it in at that rate that the indigenous can handle it. And then mixing it with all of these other things like, past lifetime, Buddhism, like different cosmologies. And so, just like the reality is that there's a lot of different spirits in the jungle and a lot of different tribes that have found different pathways in the astral. And when you start opening up all of those pathways at once within your own consciousness, there's conflict. And this doesn't even, like what I'm saying, doesn't even mean that these spirits are real. This could all be an internal process, but there's still like you mix milk with, orange juice, it's not gonna mix well. So if you're mixing all these different traditions and then trying to drink it, it's gonna give you spiritual indigestion. And Hape is not the thing that's gonna make it all go down easily. Hape is also adding something to the mix. So I just dropped a lot of stuff in that. If there's something specifically now to you wanna zoom in on.
Yeah. What do you think is happening in an ayahuasca journey? What do you how would you describe the spirit of ayahuasca or the plant? What do you think it is?
So before we even get into that, we got to talk about life and consciousness. And so my view is, we're not human beings with consciousness. We're consciousness with a human being experience. That's a really fundamentally important distinction because this is now kind of echoing back to the Eastern tradition where you have an awareness or a consciousness that is infinite, eternal, and has kind of nothing to do with embodied existence. That you have a permanent self, a permanent soul. The Buddhists don't use that, but the Buddhists do agree that there's a permanent, unchanging awareness in your mind, not your brain, in your mind. And everything is built on top of that. And so there's different frameworks for visualizing that. The Vedic system has these koshas, this idea of different bodily sheaths. Yogananda talks about the descent of Atman through these different bodies, causal body and astral body. And then finally, the physical body is just like the outer layer. One of the students asked Yogananda, in your whole breakdown, he has a metaphor like wave of the sea, the wave of the soul dissolving back into the sea of the infinite. And so somebody said, where is the physical body on that wave? And he said, it's the little tiny bit of froth at the tip of the wave. The wave is not the body. The wave is not your human identity. The wave is your immortal soul returning back to the oversoul. So that is important because that's a different way than the indigenous cosmology. So when you really interrogate some of the indigenous about the belief system, it's kind of common for like Westerners, I guess, to have like out of body experiences. Oh, I remembered a past life or like, the chakras or something like that. But the indigenous, I don't hear them talking about past life memories. I don't hear them talking about the astral in the kind of terminology that we're collectively using. And so the way that they understand it is that it's like connecting to nature. I mean, I'm not an expert in indigenous cosmology, but when you really ask, this is the medicine of the birds, of the forest, of the sun, the sky, the earth. Well, in an Eastern viewpoint, that stuff is temporary. That's just like temporary dirt. You're just here for a second and then you're on to the next thing. Like in Buddhism, tantric Buddhism in India, the point is not to actually connect with the land at all. Like you're recognizing that the land is there and there might be spirits who live on that land, but you're certainly not bowing to them and asking them to teach you. You might have an agreement with them for the short time that you're a human being, but you're not going to really like fixate on that because you're more interested in returning to this kind of oversoul. You're interested in moksha or samadhi, some kind of return to this consciousness. So, all that being said, with ayahuasca, there's many different things that are happening here. There's every plant has a spirit. Okay. Like, I don't want to go into a whole thing about how that's the case. I think we all can kind of get into the like, accept that a personality, you know, I don't want to get too technical here, but yes, plants have spirits. Yes, every living thing has a personality to it. And that personality is multifaceted. There's a physical realm personality, there is an astral personality, there's an even higher personality. But ayahuasca is the combination of two plants. So that's interesting. So somebody back in the day combined those two things for the first time. And who knows where that idea came from? Like, was it the plant spirits themselves telling them to combine those plants? Was it like an entity? Was it like an alien? Like, where did that first download come from? We don't know. We're never going to find out. But basically, because those plants, to my knowledge, are not necessarily growing in the same place naturally. So somebody had to have the trial and error. Like, what if we cook these in this specific way and drink this? That was so we're all everybody who's drinking ayahuasca is participating in that first download, in that lineage, that original guy. We're all spread out through all thousands of years in different tribes. We're all connected to that. So whatever spirit, whatever energy put that first thought in the first guy's mind to combine. So that's one thing. We're all connected to that spirit. Then there's like the personalities of the two plants themselves. And it's kind of tricky because there's this kind of automatic assumption, especially from our perspective. We're so disconnected from nature, like, oh, like a nature thing is going to be enlightened. Like, oh, the plants know better than us. Well, maybe, but like maybe they're evolving too. And maybe, plants don't have brains, like they don't have chakras. They don't have the capacity to expand their own consciousness on the earth the way that we do. And so it's possible that the plants might be experiencing themselves through our usage of them. And so there is a possible way to think about this, that the plants are also on a journey to their own kind of enlightenment, and that there's an agenda, an interest in the plants kind of experiencing themselves through people that take them. So that's another interesting thing, the plant personalities. Now, finally, there's everything else, all of the spirits of the cosmologies of the different tribes. So, I don't want to like misrepresent any particular tradition. I know a little bit about the Huni Queen. They have this relationship with the boa snake. Like, what does that mean? So, who's the boa snake? And is it just one boa snake? Are there different boa snakes? Like, is it a creator boa snake? Is it just there? Like, what is that snake? Is it enlightened? Is it enlightened in the same way that Krishna's enlightened? Or is it like a different kind of thing? And now that energy is present in the ayahuasca brew. So, anybody that's drinking ayahuasca is participating, whether they like it or not, in a a meeting of many different spirits. There's the spirits of the lineage, there's the spirits of the plant, there's the spirits of the first guy that ever combined the ayahuasca. And so you're kind of like really going into this dimensional space. Um, and the word medicine gets thrown around a lot. That I do not like at all because, think about the ways that that word is used. First of all, oh, it's the plant. It must be medicine. Well, a lot of plants are poisonous and will kill you. If you eat too much datura, you'll probably die. Like, that's not like a medicine necessarily. Then, okay, think about medicine. Like, we have, um, I don't know, not probiotics, antibiotics. When you get sick and you're prescribed an antibiotic, uh, you're given a course. You have to take this every day for this amount of time. You don't like just reach into a handful of like random antibiotics and like eat them. Like you're going to get completely messed up. In fact, your whole gut biome is going to become resistant to them and then you're not going to be able to use them the way that you need to. And so like that's medicine. Like so the medicine of the plants, you need to have the correct application of the medicine for it to be medicine. So that's another thing. So I understand that, it's hard to go, this is a vast subject. I don't want to step on anybody's toes here. My personal takeaway is that, and this is coming from the Eastern tradition, I think somewhere in some text, it says the three great gifts that a human being can have is a human body, a guru, and I think the desire to seek God. And in my understanding of the Eastern tradition, all forms of consciousness are sacred, but the human body is unique because it's the only one that can jump levels of consciousness. So a dog is always going to be a dog. Okay, it has an astral personality to it, that's for sure, but it's not going to be able to manifest infinite personality in the dog body. But a human being, the way that the spine and the brain and these chakras and the energy systems that are possible within a human body, we have the potential to manifest infinite consciousness, not human consciousness. It's easy, but like to actually, we have the possibility to transcend. That's like an incredible gift. This is why the angels, the devas, the gods are fighting to get born as humans so that they have the possibility to like jump up levels. Also, there's the possibility to go down if you don't do it correctly. So when you for example, when you attain Buddhahood, when you attain enlightenment, when you attain liberation, there's a tremendous amount of merit, like good karma that is created at that moment. It's like a bright light that outshines all the shadows in the universe. And really that's because of this invisible connection that you've created with everything you've interacted with. So if I was to attain enlightenment tomorrow, all the people that know me are going to instantly become benefited. Like the frequency, is going to like go way up. Like suddenly, like I went from being like an ordinary capacitor to like I now like anybody that ever knew me, is immediately upgraded. And so this is also, in a smaller way, true when we make decisions to change our life. Like for example, if you're an alcoholic and you make a decision, I'm going to quit, I'm going to become sober. Suddenly, you've changed your frequency. Like there's like a change. You're no longer magnetizing alcoholic connection. Now you're kind of like magnetizing a different frequency. So what the plants can do is they can open a whole bunch of that like realization like immediately. Just in the course of one night, you can have like countless realizations. And there's a tremendous amount of energy, of like merit, of like this light that's generated from that realization. However, because it's a temporary thing and because you kind of like, I don't know, forget a lot of it, are those realizations stabilized in the way that a slower, more gradual foundational approach would stabilize them. So where does that energy go that was like generated in that ceremony? And my personal feeling is like it goes to the spirits of the of the tribe. Like that's what they're doing it for. Like that's how the energies of the energies of the astral, like that's their food. Like it's kind of like in the course of the night, like you're like, oh my gosh, like I am a tribes person, like I identify with this lineage. And there's like an explosion of energy there. And the spirits are like, yes, like thank you for your energy. Now you're part of our group. And then you kind of come back to reality and you kind of forget that you had that whole process, but they don't forget. Now they have a claim on your energy. And so it's not necessarily bad. Like this happens all the time. This is just the way of the world. But basically, the way that I see it is there's like loan sharks, that will payday things that will pay you for your job. If you're like, oh, I'm getting my check in 2 weeks, but I need the money now, they'll front you the money with a high interest rate. If you don't pay it back, like, we're now it's ours. So all of the realizations, all of the breakthroughs, all of the expansiveness that can come through the plants, that's all in you. That's all things that you naturally deserve. That's like your payday. That's like your deserved check. But it's going to happen gradually after you do the work that you're supposed to do. That's the kind of the deal. But what the plants can do is they can give you that right now. But there's now an intermediary of a spirit, and so that spirit has given you your well deserved stuff, but it's actually not fully given it to you because it's now bound up in this medium of the thing that you worked through it with. And if you can pay back the loan, if you can be like a ally, if you can manage that relationship, then, that's probably fine. But if you start cutting checks, asking for advances of your energy that you cannot pay off, you're going to be in debt. And we don't know what debt means because we don't have really the proof of what that turns into. But my feeling is that the debt could mean a whole nother lifetime. The debt could mean like 7 more lifetimes. We don't know. Like, we don't know what it means to be in, like, what does it mean to be in debt to the great boa snake entity? Like, it helped you to get your healing, to get your manifestation. What are you giving back to it? And the deal might be, hey, my lineage is dying. I need people to come and incarnate into my tribe in the future and to continue to carry my thing. And now, without realizing it, now you're on the hook to give you more of your energy back. So this is the risk of not just ayahuasca, of I think any intermediary for your development of consciousness. And so I'm not saying that we shouldn't do those things, work with these different plants. I just think we need to be aware of the different ways that spirits function and make sure that we're not trading over our agency or unknowingly putting ourselves into a position of obligation to a plant spirit or to a lineage that we might not be able to fully be accountable for. And so the difference in the Buddhist and the Hindu tradition is that it's a longer road. You're not going to have necessarily all those experiences, but the road, the things that you're like indebted to, the lineage is a bit more guaranteed, stable, and hopefully, ideally grounded in compassion for all beings. A Buddha doesn't want anything of you other than for you to awaken and continue to help awakening others. That's the only thing that they want. They don't have any ulterior motive. But an intermediary spirit from wherever might not have that pure intention. So there's a long answer.
Wow, dude, that was rad. Gave me a lot to think about in there. And Another thing that I heard you say that I'd like you to just, ramble on a little bit is you said that everyone who does medicine should have a spiritual practice. And what I see in these circles is those people who don't have a spiritual practice are very untethered by the work. And so how do you think about creating a boundary? Because for me, the medicine work has actually deepened my practices outside of medicine. So unlike you, I didn't have a deep practice before I came to medicine. And as I've developed my practice, the medicine has actually informed my work outside of the circles and deepened my relationship to Hanuman and Ganesh and other deities. So how do you think about that? If one And do you think one can walk in these spaces, in these medicine circles with the spirits of the tribes, the spirits of the plants, and still have a clear enough boundary that helps inform their practices outside of the work, outside of medicine world?
Short answer, absolutely, it's possible. Absolutely, it's possible to have that clear boundary. And absolutely, this is actually what the time is of humanity. Okay. I mean, there's kind of alternative histories aside. There has never before in history been a meeting between the practices of the Amazon jungle and the practices of India and Tibet. So we are the guinea pigs. We are the pioneers who are having the opportunity to be the bridge between these completely different cosmologies. And I'm not saying that they cannot be harmoniously intertwined, but, kind of like a scientist, I said before, you don't just go mixing random chemicals. You go slow, you track everything that you've done, and okay, like I did that. Now I'm going to like maybe take a step back. Like, so I hear that, yes, so your connection has been deepened with the spiritual practices, maybe deepened with these different energies. But if you completely took a break from all plant medicine, would that connection continue to be stable? Like, is that connection only being fueled like temporarily by like the reliance on a plant foundation? That's like an important question that people need to just answer personally. There's a tremendous amount of personal responsibility when you start getting into ceremony circle because nobody, even the shaman, like, we can't expect people to kind of like walk us through this deeply psychologically transforming experience. So it's a really tough time of the planet for a lot of different reasons. There's a lot of energies, lineages that are being kind of like transformed into something new. Things are mixing together, cultures are disappearing, animals are going extinct. Like, this is a time of a tense transformation. And it's really complicated because, we don't know where to put our energy. Um so when I suggest people to have a spiritual practice, I think that people should try to find something that does not have a medium, like a plant or even to some extent a guru, something within themselves that they're cultivating, and I think that the wisest way to do this is through contemplation of consciousness, like the fact that this kind of thing that I said earlier, we're not here to, I don't want to speak for anybody's other philosophical beliefs, but this kind of idea, like, are we here to become embodied more fully? Or are we here to kind of like let go of the attachment to embodiment? Like, those are like some really different questions. Because, all right, let me back up a little bit. Famous yoga text, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Anybody who goes to yoga studio knows this text. So Like one third of that text is talking about cities, spiritual powers, power to become as large as you want, as small as you want, to manifest what you want, to gain control over to other people. And one of the pathways to getting cities is through aushadi, which is herbs, plants. So they knew that this is possible. You can get power through plants. But Patanjali warns, he says, if you become attached to this experience, it's not going to free you. It's actually going to magnify your embodiment and it's going to actually magnify your suffering because you're creating this image, this character that's more real. If you become now, you're like, it's easy to kind of like maybe step back from your life if you're like a boring person working in the grocery store and have nothing going on. But if all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I can like summon people with my mind. I can like travel through the astral with the plants. Like I can do all this amazing stuff. You've actually kind of like hyper embodied, and that mental attachment to an experience is going to persist after death. And it's going to continue to, you know, it's going to go for as long as it goes until, the wave finally dissolves back into the sea kind of thing. And so the message is to like not become like identified completely with the experience. And this is I think a different view than the indigenous tradition. And so I do not necessarily think that the indigenous cosmology is correct. I think that they've perfected the use of tools of embodiment, and that's largely because of necessity. Human beings to live in the Amazon jungle, that's a really difficult place to survive. And so, of course, you're going to make contracts with the local entities to be able to hunt and survive out there. Like, of course, like an indigenous tradition who's just exposed to the elements and to, if there's a flood, the village is destroyed. Like, yeah, of course, you're going to need a power to hold back the rain. But now we're kind of in a different time. Maybe those kind of like intermediaries between you and consciousness are no longer needed. It's not needed to develop our power in that type of way necessarily. So, context is important. It's if you're living in the middle of the jungle 1,000 years ago and you're living on that land for the rest of your life, and the only people that you're ever going to interact with are your own tribe and maybe the ones next door. Yeah, okay, make an agreement with the land spirits. But now we're like, colonizer descendant, living on land that's not ours, like eating food that's not grown from here, like importing the plants from other parts of the planet, like 5G in satellite in the astral. Like it's just like this is maybe not the best time to be completely using that as a means of embodiment. It might be kind of an integration time. So, what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that if you're cultivating just that's a practice, I don't care what it is, but something that is reminding you every day that you are the infinite and that your purpose is not to be embodied. Your purpose is to remember that you're infinite. And eventually, you still might have to go through some hard knocks, but eventually that momentum is gonna crystallize and direct you in the direction that you need to go. So, I mean, I can't deny that I've had amazing life transforming experiences through plants, and I'm sure that everybody has, and yeah, of course, we're all, like, growing when we're using it, but some people are, like, definitely not growing, like, as you say, like, some people are seeming to get, like, untethered, like, yeah, they're having phenomenal visions, but there's no, like, stability. It's a complex. I don't know if I answered your question, actually. I'm just kind of okay,
You
yeah,
did.
I'm
Yeah. Remember
remember
the
the
infinite
infinite,
is a
basically.
beautiful
Yeah.
way. Yeah. And don't, you also said, you know, don't lean on an intermediary, which I think is also really good. One can have a relationship with the intermediary without putting all of their or releasing all of their power to the intermediary. Um, for me, it's important in these spaces to have a relationship with the spirits that are
Yeah.
there. But it doesn't mean that I'm giving all of my power to them. I can honor them and show reverence, but remember that I am the infinite as well as they are the infinite. We all part of the infinite.
Yeah, and then the other thing is just, I kind of used, descriptive words like payday loans to talk about the spirits. It's not that
Yeah,
I characterize it as more negative maybe than it is. It's just a little bit more of a dice roll. It's like if you put the quarter in the gumball machine, you're gonna get a gumball. If you put the quarter in the slot machine, you might not get anything. And so the there are, in my opinion, traditions, like I obviously, have a bias towards the Eastern tradition. I think that those are a little bit more like a gumball machine. Like, I'm guaranteed to get a gumball, and, like, it's not much, but it's like I'm getting what I pay for, and the contract is explicit. Yogananda, his whole philosophy was basically, if you practice this every day, like, without fail, like, you're gonna have spiritual experiences, promise you. Like, if you continue to practice, like, I'll give you everything that I have, which is God realization, you know? But is it true? He did it. He said, "You just gotta practice it. Just gotta do it and find out." And so, I am liable. I agree that Yogananda is telling the truth. I believe that he's good on his guarantee. The fault is with me. The fault is that I was not able to discipline myself to do the practices properly, consistently every day. And I wanted a shortcut. That's really, I mean, like, if I'm being honest, like, that's probably what it is. Like, this is the time of shortcuts. And I don't, it's not like, it's okay to take a shortcut, but, if you are in an unfamiliar place and there's a highway and you know that the highway is going where you want to go, and then you get off the road and you're like, well, I'm just going to take the shortcut and see where it goes. It might be short, it might be long, it might, like, your car, you might get a flat tire and you're not going to have anyone to pick you up because you're not on the highway anymore. So it's just, if you're going to, put your quarter in the slot machine of plant medicine, every time that you take the plant, that you do the drink, you have no idea what is behind that moment. And you can have a blissful ceremony turn into something extremely difficult and one that might not leave you. And so I had that experience a number of times in different ways. One Hape blow, you know, that I'd done, 100 times before. This time, it, like, completely shut down my third eye, and it was, like, excruciating pain, and the pain continued in the following weeks. Like, what was that about? Like, I don't know. Like, it's a slot machine. Like, is it a healing? That's kind of the way that it's characterized. Like, well, it's a medicine, and you can never mess up the medicine, so there was probably something inside of you that needed to get healed. And it's like, I don't that's not that's like the abusive guru writing off abuse and saying, well, the person deserved it because, like, they had something in their karma that I needed to heal. Like, no, I'm not playing those games. Like, it's either going to be straight with me, or it's probably not safe. So the plant path is a little bit of a slot machine, and obviously this can be mitigated by having a shaman, relationship with the shaman, by a lifelong intentional study of that tribe. But then the last thing is, like, you really have to ask, is that tribe, is the cosmology of that truly leading to the infinite? That, back to that original thing. So, like, kind of
yeah.
cultivating this kind of infinite reminder, and also always, like, having, like, a kind of discriminative questioning. You don't have to completely point out everything, but just now and then you have to ask, like, is this really an enlightened technology? Like, I know it feels really good when it's good, but is everybody here really, like, is this really working the way that it says it will work? And I mean, we could find these flaws in the Eastern tradition. I'm not claiming that, yeah, that the
Of
Eastern
course,
tradition is
of course.
immune. You know, I've hung out at the Kumbh Mela with the sadhus, and all they're doing is smoking hash. I'm not putting that like I'm not. Yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
saying that's better than this.
yeah. I'm gonna hold the vision that there's a place where the two work beautifully together towards the same type of goal. And I'm just throwing that out there as, but I agree with you that the anchor is the lineage, is the practice, is the Eastern practice. But the plants are, if the anchor's strong, the plants are helping that that practice and that lineage to take deeper root. And I'm just holding that vision for myself, right? And I don't know if anybody else has it. I don't, doesn't sound like you have it, but maybe you had it at some point as a vision. I really think there's, but and I agree with you, it's super complicated because you're dealing with the lineage spirits, you're dealing with the plant spirits, you're dealing with the spirits from the indigenous side. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I think
Yeah,
there's a way. I'm holding it. I'm holding it.
I don't want to give the impression that I'm like anti plants. Like, no, we shouldn't do it. I personally feel that it's not my path because I'm working with the Eastern tradition. It's such an intense degree with all the other yogic stuff and the mantras that particular chemical from the Eastern tradition, it could be explosive if I mix in the plant stuff right now. And so and I'm also a little bit in, like, timeout, like, you went a little bit too fast, we put you in the car and you just immediately went to 120 miles an hour, you kinda burned out the engine, you gotta just give it some time, man. So, that's for me personally, but I absolutely believe that the plants can be facilitating of tremendously healing experiences. I mean, the way that I started this interview was talking about the way that it transformed my relationship with my family, with my lineage, with my sense of place that I don't think would have ever come from the eastern side. That's not part of the discussion. There's absolutely value to the embodiment that the plant tradition offers. But it's just remembering that, in Buddhism, they have a term, you can respect the local spirits. That can even mean gods, everything. You just don't put them on your crown as like your teacher to infinite. You just don't give them that last bit. It's like friends, like you can hang out with the friends and you help each other out as much as you need, but you don't necessarily bow at the feet of your friends and say, please guide me and like show me the way to permanent fulfillment of my soul. It's like we can be friends with these plants and the lineages that come with them, but we don't necessarily have to completely kind of like lay our spiritual sovereignty completely, because we're in a unique position as the bridge between the east and the west. And so I think in one of my other podcasts, in the context of Hinduism, I was talking about how there's a little bit of value of being like a westerner or like a white person studying Hinduism, because I'm not culturally bound to adhere to a particular view. If I'm born into a Brahmin family whose parents, have been the custodians of the temple for the past 16 years, I'm not going to break that chain. Like there's too much weight there for me to even think outside the box. But as somebody now, like, I don't have a lineage anymore, like, I don't know what my ancestors were doing, so, yeah, I might as well look at things, like, objectively and neutrally and compare different views to see what one works best, and so that's kind of like our medicine, is the ability to kind of try different things and see how things intertwine and maybe make changes, whereas an indigenous person, and like a Huni Kuin tribe member, because they're born into that lineage, they have a little bit more of an obligation to represent that. And our job is not necessarily to take on that level of obligation. Our job might be to be like, okay, like I meditated with TM for this many years, and that was that. Now I'm doing this for this many years, and that's that. Like,
Mm,
how did they mix together? And that process is like integral for the future. Like, if we don't do this process responsibly, the whole thing is gonna collapse, I think, because the plant traditions are now sitting at the table of world religions. We have, all of them in there's Catholicism and, Buddhism and the Islam and everybody. Now all of a sudden, psychedelics and whatever that crazy implications that term means has pulled a seat up at the table and says, "I'm here as a path. Now integrate me," you know? And that's
yeah.
a long conversation that's gonna take many decades and many people's trial and errors. And my contribution is just the little infinite have a daily practice part. But I am personally, in my studies, I'm looking into some aspects of the tantric tradition, the Narasimha, another thing in Buddhism, this Yamataka practice as antidotes, because I'm not gonna stop
Mm,
anybody while they're in their growth phase. If they feel like they're connecting and they're opening and it's working, by all means, go for it. What I wanna be able to do is that if somebody flies top speed into a wall, which is kind of what I felt happened to me, I wanna be able to have some of the spiritual information to help them put the
mm,
pieces back together. Because that's gonna start maybe to show up more and more, as some of the ex
mhm,
right now, especially the past 5 years, this explosion of availability of all these things. And, I think in the next 5 years, we might have people kind of like coming out and being like, "Whoa, I completely, blew out my nose from Hape," like, which is something that happened to me. So, yeah.
mm. Beautiful. Brother, thank you so much for this conversation. I know you're getting ready to go to India, so I don't want to take too much of your time, but definitely would love to have you back on, talk about your India trip and dig into Namasimha and yeah, hear all that too. Really appreciate
Oh,
you,
thank
bro.
you so much. It's been a real pleasure. And yeah, absolutely. Anytime, we'll see, how it goes in terms of scheduling. And just thanks
Yeah,
so much. And happy to come back and keep the conversation going.
great, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you.